Sabal here. Azul. Good morning. Ambassador, Mr. Borden, honored guests, friends. Nice to see so many of you that we saw a few weeks ago. On behalf of Binda Consulting International, I'm proud to present the public report. This document is a collective effort of a number of people, but most importantly, it tells the story of Libyan women and men who actively build their communities. Now we have to see if the technology works. Nope. Okay, I'll leave you to do the technology in the back. Thanks. So this report, which will be released during the break, synthesizes and analyzes data and information collected during interviews with 73 respondents, 52 of whom are women, and all of whom are Libyan citizens from different parts of Libya that work either exclusively on women's programming or include women's programming in their projects. Broad groups, civil society activists, representatives from civil society activists, organizations, influencers, people in the community who have an impact on the behavior of citizens in their communities, mostly academics, public media personalities, and prominent business people. And then members of the community themselves who live in communities in which civil society organizations work and can have an influence or potential to influence the activities of civil society organizations. Binda Consulting designed the research instruments in partnership with IWPR and Reboot as part of a larger project. Many of you have been beneficiaries of this from the last couple of weeks, where we worked with your organizations, assessing your organizational capacity and examining the environment in which you work. The majority of interviews lasted between an hour to 2 to 3 hours, and I know that many people in this room spent time talking to researchers. As Mr. Borden mentioned, the research found that the success and impact of civil society organizations is not about how big you are, it is not about how well structured you are and the strength of your organization, but relies on creativity and energy of the activists. And in fact, many loose-knit ad hoc groups were able to have impact in programming. Raeda aims to enhance not only the organizational capacity, but also your ability to be sustainable organizations and to be able to have an impact on the lives of people in your community and improve the visibility of Libyan women. So the findings from the research as they are presented in this report: volunteerism. Volunteerism is thriving in Libya. There are CSO teams made entirely of volunteers that drive successful programs and deliver vital assistance under challenging circumstances. They are delivering humanitarian assistance, support, education, health support, mitigating conflict, all with the valuable support of volunteers. Volunteering in a civil society organization or a charitable organization provides a safe and acceptable space to participate in activities outside the home, which is particularly important for women in Libya. Some CSOs, though, in the research notice that there is a decline in volunteer stamina in Libya. And this can be attributed to the fact that many people these days have to stand in lines, they have to less time to donate to organizations such as yours. 3 weeks ago, we talked with many of you about ways to recruit and retain volunteers, and that will be a challenge for your organizations. But as powers and authorities devolve to the local level in Libya, it will be important for local authorities to recognize the importance of volunteers, because they can support local councils, provide legitimacy and resources to the work of local authorities. There is an opportunity for official Libya to recognize the work of volunteers and to promote volunteerism in the future. Online activism. Online activism has increased as the security situation has decreased and as travel becomes more difficult and physical gathering almost impossible in some communities. CSOs are developing platforms that provide distance education, empowerment programs, and exchange of information. Most significantly, again, online platforms offer safe spaces for Libyans that can exchange information, particularly women. More and more women in Libya are engaging online. Traditional media is also important for civil society organizations. Many respond in relationships with local media can help build the trust and support in communities in which they work. Radio is a trusted medium, and more so than television, a reputation of being politically neutral, a reputation that was developed during the revolution. Relatively accessible community-based radio provides an opportunity for civil society organizations to tell their stories. Civil society organizations are filling gaps. They're stepping up and filling the gaps in the service sector where the inability or unwillingness of government has created a vacuum. Many organizations provide frontline assistance to people, to women and children traumatized by conflict, and to those requiring medical support or treatment. Organizations providing direct support to vulnerable communities rely on the expertise of doctors and teachers who volunteer in clinics and schools to fill the gaps with civil societies. Civil society is talking about sensitive issues. Libyan conservative culture does not allow for easy public discussion of personal or private issues, particularly domestic and sexual violence. Not all health issues are welcome in public discussions, such as sexually transmitted diseases. Despite this, civil society organizations are finding ways of approaching public health discussions, creating safe spaces for psychosocial support, and raising issues related to gender-based violence. Using online platforms, partnering with international and national government organizations, Libyans are sharing vital information, exchanging experiences, and providing support to vulnerable groups. The research uncovered various and contradictory perceptions of civil society organizations and the impact of your work in Libya. CSOs are a new phenomenon, as you know, since 2011, and suspicion over what they do demonstrates that they have yet to educate the people and citizens on the role of civil society in a democracy. Confused and negative perceptions are not altogether unfounded. You told us that you often fail to tell your story properly. There's also divergent views on the opinion on the status of women. Community members often cite women's engagement in politics, the fact that women can drive, the fact that women are in business and manage companies as an evidence of achievement and that the status of women has advanced. And even women CSOs who work on the empowerment of women do recognize that there has been more permissive space in the last year. They fear that the space is fragile. And they also believe that genuine political empowerment is in decline. Many respondents believe that socially conservative norms of Libya are significant factors in defining the roles of men and women within their family and community. Despite these norms, many organizations are advancing and advocating for access to rights within this dynamic. CSO activists suggest that imported ultra-conservative views on the rights of women mean that Libyan institutions do not respect the current legal framework for the rights of women. Disregard for inheritance laws, the lack of action on gender-based violence are two examples of how attitudes affect the status of women. Divorced and widowed women are particularly vulnerable to the dictates of their families, influenced by growing conservative values. Most of those interviewed acknowledge that the security situation has a universal impact in Libya, but affects women's organizations, heightened tensions, ad hoc checkpoints, uncertain sensitivities, crime, all have restrictive impacts on how women can travel and where they can gather. Planning events becomes much more difficult when participation requires travel by road for women. These restrictions are more pronounced in remote and rural communities. Organizations that focus on advocacy on human rights are at risk of reprisal or violence by armed or militia groups. While many well-known human rights advocates and defenders have left Libya for their own safety, those who remain are cautious about raising perceived violations of human rights. Many of the respondents who contributed to the research discussed the dangers of highlighting violations in the absence of law to protect activists from reprisals. Rights defenders mute legitimate and urgent human rights issues for fear of safety for self, family, or community. Most of the CSOs interviewed discussed formal and mainly the grassroots level. Given the vacuum of governance, the economic and security crises, CSOs are filling in where the state would ordinarily be leading. And given the difficulty of mobility and tensions from one region to another, CSOs have begun networking collaborations. For example, implementing a national program by one organization would be difficult to be strangers in different communities or perceived as being from the wrong political side. Increasingly, CSOs are reaching out across the country, identifying like-minded organizations to partner up with to engage in extensive program delivery. As volunteerism is thriving, so too is the activity of local councils and the business creating a commitment to economic and social development. Partnerships for development are filling the governance void caused by the current political crisis. The research demonstrates that most respondents view local councils as important partners in community development. These councils may lack significant formal political authority, but they are well respected by citizens and well regarded in the community. Most organizations we interviewed which have dealt with local government report councils often facilitate initiatives through provisions of venues and other material assistance. While most of those interviewed believe that the national government has become dysfunctional because of the political crisis, many acknowledge that the branch level of national ministries are engaged in community development. Not surprisingly, and particularly in rural and remote communities, branch level workers are also members of the community, often influential, and they themselves volunteer or are active in local development activities. As with local government, the branch level of ministries, their officials provide civil society organizations with logistical, material, and expertise support. The international community is not fully understood, although it is appreciated. The research suggests that most Libyans do not understand the motivations, mechanisms for international support in their community. Several respondents suggested that armed groups who benefit from the current absence of law paint civil societies as colluding with foreign agents so that they can continue to operate in a community without law. Finally, some measure of misunderstanding can be attributed to the fact that the international community is not physically absent yet, again in Libya, and this absence prevents it from conducting public diplomacy and from bridging that understanding. As well, a few organizations interviewed for this research fail to appreciate the complexity of international assistance. They don't understand priority setting and decision-making processes of the international community. The research identified several programmatic priorities for civil society organizations, and we will discuss a couple of them. Economic empowerment. The current state of Libya's economy, as you know, is dire. Inflation, security, and a liquidity crisis are building within families, and particularly among vulnerable communities. In response to the shifting reality, several organizations are now focusing on programmatic activities on the economic empowerment of women. Most respondents in the study believe that economic empowerment is also a pathway to political empowerment. Women who engage in economic activities can gain experiences and demonstrate capacity and competence that they can transfer to governmental and political sectors. Although economic participation for women is considered more acceptable than other activities for women, they still face significant challenges from social as well as religious attitudes. Aside from the conservative view of a woman's place in the home, women are sometimes confronted by bureaucrats with ultra-conservative perspectives who refuse to register businesses in their name. To avoid harassment, many women end up registering through a male relative or in the family name. Because of the liquidity and banking crisis, more women are starting cash-friendly businesses, selling products online from their homes and from storefronts. Anecdotally, respondents told us that some businesses that traditionally never employed women, such as restaurants, are increasingly hiring more female employees, something that never happened in the past. While the private sector was slowly opening up to Libyans, particularly in the aftermath of the revolution, the current economic crisis of the past year has accelerated entry into the private sector that provides women in particular with new economic challenges. When we talk about political empowerment, organizations that promote the political empowerment of Libyan women do so in a variety of ways. A majority of CSOs, however, tread very cautiously when talking and dealing with politics. Many organizations are reluctant to become engaged in political activities when the shifting alliances mean that picking the wrong side can damage their and their families' standing in the community. The lack of political bodies, blocs, or parties that empower and advocate for women further discourages women activists from making that leap from civic engagement to politics. In other countries, political parties are important vehicles for political participation and engagement for women. The absence of formal political institutions is keenly felt in the south of Libya, where tribes and militia control local institutions and govern according to their own rules and traditions. Women are largely absent from the national level conflict resolution process in Libya. They are, however, making inroads at local level reconciliation and mediation efforts. Several activists are already engaged in local committees, work that influencers and members of the community recognize as valuable contributions to the process. Based on the report and the research, we offer up the following recommendations for civil society organizations in Libya. First, political leaders by identifying and training activists and community members who enjoy influence and who can be recruited to run for political office at all levels. Preparing women for engagement now will provide them and equip them for robust participation when the Libyan political process becomes less toxic and less hostile. Preparing them when that happens is too late. CSOs should conduct public accountability process monitoring. Many citizens are often unaware of initiatives that are being considered by the national or local government. CSOs can provide fora and space for debating public policies and disseminating information about the issues and initiatives before Parliament or before the local government that affect the interests of different groups, particularly women and children. CSOs can build the capacity for effective communication skills and techniques, using methods of direct and indirect communication to practice speaking to one another about women in politics and sharing success stories. CSOs can organize cyber gatherings through, for instance, groups on Facebook or Viber in regions where ground gatherings are not possible. CSOs can help demystify the issue identification and policy development process. Women who lack experience in politics often believe they are unable to compete because they do not have the requisite knowledge of the weighty issues. They don't understand the economy and budgeting. They don't understand security and defense issues. And that often holds them back. CSOs, particularly those that engage in research, advocacy, or government monitoring, can help political aspirants understand complex policy issues. With regards to women's active citizenship, we recommend that CSOs organize debates and dialogues for marginalized groups or candidates. Often organizers of public or televised debates tend to only invite men in the community or senior male leaders of political organizations. CSOs can provide spaces for women, for influencers, for other marginalized people in the community to have their voice heard and to develop a network or a database of women role models. How many times have we heard women aren't interested in running for politics or women aren't qualified? So by establishing a network of women and maintaining information on their capacities, their areas of interest, their willingness to be called on to participate at various levels, this will allow CSOs and political activists to rapidly identify women to participate in public events so that they can be promoted as candidates for public and elected office. CSOs, in terms of resolution, can promote the skills of Libyan women, some of whom are already engaged in reconciliation initiatives in their communities. Women can share experiences and discuss conflict resolution practices. CSOs can expand participation to include women in government and in elected positions for whom negotiation skills are very useful. We suggest that CSOs try to engage religious leaders as influencers, to engage them in a dialogue with women, to exchange experiences, and to educate these leaders on the impact of conflict on women and their potential role in reconciliation. CSOs should continue to build the confidence and encourage the participation of women in dialogue, peace efforts, and conflict prevention at the local level in reconciliation processes. Women can influence people around them. They influence their families, their communities, their tribes. Social media can be used to share information that can be useful for activities on reconciliation, particularly between tribes. In terms of women's empowerment, we recommend that civil society organizations provide practical guidance on entrepreneurial and fundamental business development skills. Civil society organizations can provide instruction on issues such as entrepreneurship management, leadership, administration, and marketing. Some women also need training in skills that can be useful when finding jobs in female-friendly sectors, such as language skills, English, computer skills, home-based jobs, handicrafts, and beautician skills. CSOs can also provide more advanced support to women who have already established women-owned or women-managed businesses to enhance their networks and develop market linkages. Advanced trainings can also include developing web-enabled, social media-based and SMS technologies, e-marketing, sustainable businesses, financial programs, and tools to increase access to financial services and markets. We recommend that CSOs consider creating and support mentorship programs for women entrepreneurs. Women who have already established businesses can mentor younger women and beginners by sharing experiences and providing ongoing practical help and information to navigate the banking system, understand issues such as demand and supply of goods and foreign currency. When the security environment improves, CSOs should consider publicly celebrating the success of women in business. CSOs can also advocate to national and international organizations to develop microfinance opportunities for women entrepreneurs. With regards to legal literacy and reform, we recommend that CSOs design activities to protect and promote the existing rights of Libyan women. CSOs can advocate for increased equality under the law and proper application of international agreements and conventions which Libya has already signed, such as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW Convention. CSOs can develop legal literacy education activities. Legal aid and literacy can be delivered via workshops, telephone helplines, medical legal clinics, online information, chat tools, or downloadable court forms. Such activities and education help people understand their rights and their responsibilities. It helps them understand when legal assistance may be necessary and where to find it. CSOs can advocate for legal reform in Libya to redress gender discrimination in laws. They can conduct studies and use existing knowledge and information to develop proposals for legal reform. The research shows that several CSOs already know women have asked for reform in the citizenship law, the family law, and laws addressing gender-based violence. You as CSOs are well placed to organize advocacy campaigns to inform policymakers and legislators, not just on the needs, but on the solutions to legal reform. You can expand and strengthen legal assistance to women with special needs. When designing legal assistance programs, CSOs should particularly target women with disabilities, women prisoners, displaced women, and women married to non-Libyans. CSOs can establish hotlines for women and men at risk of violence. Hotlines can provide victims of violence the ability to speak to volunteer professionals who can advise and direct victims to support services. We recommend that CSOs provide victim support services to men as well, those who encounter sexual violence, such as rape, in prison. CSOs can monitor and document cases of gender-based violence. You can provide authorities with information on gender-based violence, including sexual violence, abductions, and harassments. You can pressure government and the justice system to also start violence to ensure that perpetrators of gender-based violence are punished. And the last two recommendations we have are that CSOs establish centers and shelters for victims of violence. Volunteer medical professionals can provide services to women to heal physically and psychologically, as well as provide counseling for families to break the culture of victim blaming. CSOs can expand programs that address women's health, including reproductive rights, protection of people living with HIV/AIDS, as entry points to talking about more sensitive issues of gender-based violence. And before I go, I too have people to thank. Many individuals worked on this research project. 6 Libyan researchers braved to collect the data, conduct interviews, and to relay the stories, perspectives, and realities of civil society organization. The research team was led by Mohamed Kassaoune, who it is impossible for me to list all of his many invaluable contributions, but I'll try and highlight a few of them. He worked with the researchers to help them overcome obstacles they faced in the field. He brought his depth of experience with civil society in the Middle East and North Africa to shape the research to ensure that the data were stored and protected and delivered in a way that allowed us to analyze the results and present the findings in a practical manner to be of use to IWPR and to you as the civil society organizations. He also worked with the IWPR team to finalize the report being released today. Two gender experts were very much involved in all stages of the research. The gender experts reviewed the research instruments, they reviewed the analysis, and they reviewed the final report. A team of translators worked long hours to translate interviews and data, CSO assessments. The New York-based company Reboot contributed to the design of the research instruments and the final report. The entire IWPR team, many of whom are here today, worked tirelessly to get this project off the ground. Their support in liaising with CSO partners, in helping gather and analyze data, and their overall coordination efforts were invaluable. Of course, it was the foresight of the Government of the United Kingdom, of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to prioritize engagement with Libyan civil society organizations that has made this project possible. Support of the UK Embassy to Libya to invest substantial funds and time to a project like this is rare in the international donor community and demonstrates a unique commitment. Finally, the research and the presentation of the results would not have been possible without your participation in this project. Several people in this room gave generously of their time to meet with our researchers and to answer their many, many questions. Without your willingness to discuss your organization's challenges and achievements and to share your opinion, we would not have the rich and profound understanding of your work. Thank you. Shukran. Shukran.